That's what those are. I didn't know. Those are the categories.
I got the owl right in front of me.
For land.
5 out of 7.
I don't know, it's bridging the gap here.
Okay.
It's the furthest spot. I had to have the 18 in my chart, but I have to have the owl.
Combine what you, all the work you've done in the past with this.
Taking these, and putting them on our form, so we see how they match up.
Yeah.
That's all.
So have you developed the whole master? This is only part of it. Have you developed the whole final master?
No.
So we are called to order and we will do attendance. Maggie, do you all start?
Maggie Vishnu, here.
Rick Murphy.
Jessica Sargent,
Stephen Nemorowski. Hanson Bolt.
Dick, attendance,
Pardon?
say your name.
Richard Harvey.
Doug Williams. Nick Cush.
Nicole Hall.
And I would like to now open the meeting for public comment. Recognize that we have a guest.
Good morning. Andrew Mackey, Scarborough Land Trust. Don't have a lot to say, but I do want to mention 2 things. Our native plant sale is coming up May 31st, Broadturn Farm. Pre-orders are now open on the website. I will pass. Feel free to take some flyers and give them to anyone that you want, especially anyone who happens to spend a lot of time outside in their yard planting all sorts of native plants.
What are the hours?
8 to noon. And then I'll also mention tonight we have a program on bees right next door in the public safety classroom. I forget what time that starts. It starts at 6 p.m. So that should be good, a good program, and works right into our plant sale. I think that's it.
So I would like to thank Rick again for putting together the minutes for our March meeting. So this is from March, not our workshop in April, and they were included as a part of your packet. Do we have a motion to approve? Second? Any changes or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Okay, I put updates at the top because we're gonna move into talking about the evaluation criteria. So I wanted to get the updates out of the way. Great news. I think I shared via email that the town council unanimously approved the Beaver Brook 49 Grant Road conservation easement at the April 16th council meeting. So that was very exciting. We didn't know how it was going to go with the new, not completely new, but with a conservation easement vehicle, if that would require some additional public education, but they approved. I don't know if you noticed it on the way in. There is an art installation with the sand in the vestibule, which is tracking the progress towards the 30 by 30 goal. And so that was also the April 16th meeting, but it's really fun. It's really beautiful. So I encourage you to take a look. I did get some emails of, what are you sending me a picture of? It is the art piece that is tracking our progress towards the 30 by 30 goal. So every time there is the conservation is finalized, there will be more sand added to the art piece. And I think we're about 70% of the way towards the 30 by 30.
Who gets to add the sand?
Yeah.
Karen did last time, but I don't think that she gets to do it every time. I would say, I think we should get to that to say it at some point. We might have to, fight for that one, but I'm willing to do that fight because it's really cool. At the same April 16th town meeting, the open space plan was accepted by council. So I think all very good things. Big meeting. And it wasn't even a long one. I think we were out of there by 8:30. It wasn't a 10 o'clock meeting at all, but it is official. It's officially accepted now. Any questions about that meeting? Yeah, there wasn't even, it was a public hearing and second reading, and there were no questions, there was no public
Nothing about
discussion.
open space.
Nothing, no, just, yes. Which I think is good. And then I have attached to the agenda, the land acquisition reserve fund remaining authorization report. It is the third page. It looks, well, the orientation is portrait, not landscape this time, but I think we're starting to move into the 2024 bond funds according to this. I was a little confused with the land acquisition fund being at 430,000, but whether we were truly dipping into the 2024 bond, but we're getting there. It's close.
I don't know personally what the process is for making that decision. Maybe it's something that, it's not a
It's not ours.
responsibility,
Right.
but, anyway, that'd be interesting to know.
Yes. And I think we can always ask Norm for clarification. And then Nick had mentioned to me when he sent it to me, this does not reflect April because the April, like the interest earned doesn't get calculated until May, but as you can see, it's a nominal amount. It's not going to change things dramatically. Last month, in March, it was $300.
The reason I say that, and I know everybody understands this here, is it's, it's interest-free money. It's not gonna cost us money in the future.
Yes.
So I would think we try to find a way to make it work.
Yeah, I agree with that. We should use that money first.
I also understand the bonding is a complex process here in this building. So I'm not trying to push the bond, because there's, we haven't had funds in there for a long time. So we might not be used to using them.
We asked Karen about that.
I think we asked Norm about that. I think we asked Norm first, just because
Yeah.
it is more complicated, like the town will issue a large bond package. It's not just, like, it could be,
It's complex.
it could be the fire truck and, 3 parcels, for example, and then it's not, they don't go out each,
Right.
they do it a few times a year, and when they do it, it's been explained to us that it's really complicated.
So you're saying this may already be spoken?
That's possible.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yes, we can just
Possible.
get clarification,
Plan,
like, does it go land acquisition fund, the 430,000, then the 2019 bond, and then the 20. That's how we assume it works, but we don't.
I guess
It's
part
not-
of the thing I'm confused about is can it be used for something that we approve for bonding?
Right.
And that raises an issue, because if in fact we should be specifying anything
Do we need to
in our own
modify
recommendation,
our recommendation language?
if they vote for what we recommend, does that tie them to bonding?
Right.
So anyway, something
Yes.
that it would be good to ask Norm, it'd be good to
And which
Yeah.
bond?
just have them tell us, well, that's really complicated. There's more than one. They're
Yeah,
serious.
and they're all probably in the same pot of money.
Yeah, it's very complicated. I don't care,
We're just
Per
asking
se.
as it relates to our recommendations, like how,
is there something we should be doing differently?
like, should we be,
I just hate things where I just have no clue what's going on.
Yes. We're never satisfied with it. It's complicated.
It's okay, it's a black box.
But it's wonderful. We have this information at our meetings, consistently at our meetings now, and I think it's really helpful for us to be aware on what the general status is. I don't expect it to be too many. Are there any other questions or thoughts on the remaining bond authorization record?
Nice seeing that, thank you. I think it's a good idea to see on a regular basis.
I also think it's really important for transparency. You know, this is now part of our packet. Anyone in the public can see it. It's available at all times. It's a real-time number. It's not, you know, every 6 months or a year. And Norm does, you know, as we all know, the conservation purchases close at different times, you know, that are related, you know, are not related to our timeline. So they are reflected in real time also when they are closed, when the check is cut.
I will say, Jess, that having looked at these a lot over the years, the way they do it, the way one does it, it looks like 416 town council approval is expected to come out of the 6 months.
That's the way it looks. Yeah, that's the way it looks, yes.
Yeah, that's what it looks.
Yes.
That would be the first dip into that
Yes.
bonding.
Because I have gotten the question, you know, have we used all the 2019? You know, are we using the new bonds? And I think, again, it's complicated. I think we have, it has been authorized, but it hasn't been spent yet.
Just, once again, 246,000 for Grant Road.
Yep.
Why isn't that coming out of the
430. Yeah.
And maybe the plan is to do that, but this looks like it's coming out of 6.
Yes. So it's just a little bit of clarification on that, because again, one, it could impact our recommendation language, and then 2, how we communicate that to the public.
Yeah, when we recommended the creation of a land bond fund, it was for this purpose, right?
Right.
If you've got to look at money here and there from all these various development things and all that sort of stuff, people paying back stuff, et cetera, then you've got a little bit of flexibility in terms of what you have to bond and not bond.
Can I ask a newbie question here?
Absolutely.
I'm sure all of you know the answer to this, but I don't. Why are certain purchases earmarked against 2019? Why is this other purchase sort of earmarked against the new bond? It looks like, isn't this all fungible? I mean, you should have 813,000 left from the 19 bond, and then you have 5.7 from the more recent one, and then you have 430. Doesn't it all add up?
So the 430 doesn't add up because of one caveat, and that is the sale of Alger Hall. So the 2019 land bond was used for the purchase of Alger Hall. And the Historical Society purchased it from the town. And those monies were reimbursed into the land acquisition fund. So they originally came out of the 2019 bond for the sale, like they cut a check, the town bonded on those amounts, but then there were proceeds when they sold it to the Historical Society. And those funds should now be available for us to make recommendations for spending consistent with the land bond. Right, so they can only use the proceeds as we recommend. So one of our questions is, should we be recommending specifically that we use land acquisition funds, that 430,000, before we start dipping into the 2024 land bond?
So it's also important looking at this to understand that this is not really a cash flow diagram. It reflects a picture of how the land bond funds were taking part in overall bonding. So, for example, if you look at commitments, you see 13,009 coming out of what was left of the earlier bonding before this past one, before the 6 million. And, but that's actually part of the 246,098 that's down below, that's coming out of the middle. So it's an accounting, it's not an accounting process, because the accounting process is much more complicated, because it has to do with the entire town bonding process. But this is building a picture and saying, if you have to draw a picture of what was funded when, you'd say that you had 813,900 bonding left of the original 2.5. So therefore, I have to allocate that somehow to show, even though it's part of some big pools of bonding. So this is a picture that's drawn for us, but it's not an actual accounting of exactly what cash flow we are going.
Okay,
It's more of a capacity, how much capacity is remaining available from 2019, how much capacity is remaining available from 2024, and then what is actually sitting in a fund earning interest.
It's just, it is really confusing though, Jess, because, you know.
Oh, absolutely, it's very confusing.
you know, I kind of came to the conclusion that I would let this evolve a little bit rather.
Well, yeah, for example, the 813,900 before these commitments down below, the 813,900, it's a real number, but it's not an accounting number in the town. Town balance sheet, but it's just, it's part of a big picture of all bonding. But within that, they build little pictures of how the bonding was allocated to various things. But even that isn't exact, because it doesn't really matter. It's just building a picture, because a certain amount has been bonded, no matter what. And who gets a share of that pie is strictly a reporting accounting process to a large degree.
So it's helpful, I guess, the capacity, thinking of it as capacity is helpful to me, because it's, okay, we want to help purchase something. Do we have the funds?
Yes.
I mean, that's really
Do we
the
have the
question.
ability?
Do we have the ability? And that would be the question that would come before the group. And then, so this helps us see that, but
And then just
nothing's going to add up.
for me, it's understanding if we have 5.8 plus 430,000, or, yeah, just understanding, because my understanding is it's the 5,753,000, blah, 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 plus the 430,000 is what the ability we have.
That's the reason I started this, because I want to know if that's true.
If that's true.
Right, if that's
Yeah.
true.
I understand
We
what
just
the
want to know if it's
5.7,
additive.
I understand what the 5.7 is. I don't understand why we're not using the 400. And that suggests that it's committed somehow, or it can't be committed without something happening.
Right.
Can I ask one more thing? So what happened to the 813,000 unspent authorization? Is that still there, or is that somehow?
It's still there until those two projects, the 49 Grant Road and the 65 Hanson Roads, close, and they cut checks against that bonding capacity. The commitments.
So it's committed.
Committed by us.
I see, I got you.
Because there's two
No,
things,
no, I didn't see the next one down. Probably said.
because they haven't closed, so so why we're stumbling is they have to close, and that happens in one time period. And then the town might bond a whole big package of things at a later date. So there's the closing date, and then when the actual bonding happens, and those are not the same date.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, I missed the thing there.
That's why we refer to it as a commitment.
I got you.
It hasn't been drawn either for the purchase and sale agreement, like for the actual closing, and it also hasn't actually been bonded until the town puts out their bond package, which can include, it will include many more things. Because the town only goes out to bond a
Yeah,
couple of times a year.
yeah.
I'm a little rusty on my municipal bonding knowledge. I actually did have to study this stuff. I took my securities test years ago, but that was a long time ago. But my recollection is that in order to issue bonds, you have to have a legal opinion that says these bonds have been authorized. The legal opinion doesn't care when it was authorized or how much. So for our purposes, we should think of this as an $8.5 million authority. A bunch of it has been used up. It happens that the 2.5 million ran out right in the middle of an acquisition. So part of that, the whatever the number is, 13,000 or so, closes out that old bond authority, and the rest of it starts the new clock. So that's why there's two different items. As far as the land acquisition fund, you shouldn't mix and match those for the purpose of answering that question about why the chronology of charging some of the authorities against the 2019 authorization and the rest against the 2020. The land acquisition is separate money. It looks to me like it actually exists someplace because it's earning interest. So those are two pools of money that, for the purposes of getting to your question, shouldn't really be mixed and mixed at this point. So essentially, we have a number of acquisitions. The 2019 authority covered most of them. It ran out in the middle of an acquisition, so we started dipping into the new one. That's why it appears in that list. And it's a little bit confusing because under commitments, which has been authorized but not yet issued, those are out of order. The oldest one should be on top and the newest one should be underneath. Because the oldest one was in June 2024.
Right.
So that's why that particular 49 grant acquisition was split in half and not the Hanson Road, just because it happened last.
We're gonna see this every meeting.
No, that's very, very helpful. How do they pay for, sorry,
That's
how do they pay for a purchase before the bonds are issued?
Some of the candidates are actually contracted but not funded until the money becomes available. In some cases, and it isn't necessarily all at one, in some cases, a portion of the money that we expend might be reimbursed from another source. So that really does get into an item by item analysis. For most of them, Andrew, do you mind putting me back on the right path if I fell off someplace? But for most of the acquisitions that the land trust has dealt with, they don't actually close until the bond goes out and the money gets put into a checking account. Is that right?
It's my understanding that when we close on a property, if the council has approved authorization of land bond or land acquisition reserve fund dollars, that money is wired into escrow. So we never see it. It never goes through our books. It goes into whatever attorney or title company is handling the closing.
Okay.
And that money is sent by the town well before it's bonded. So they're just pulling out of their reserve cash at that time. And then they do the accounting journal entry of when they bond, putting that money back into reserve.
But I point out it's not cash flow. However, what you just described, Rick, is important because you started out by saying it's two pools of money, the reserve fund and the bond. And therefore you should mix those two. And when does the reserve fund get used? when does it, and should we be requesting?
I think who has the action asked about that?
Nick.
Thank you. We could talk about this forever, I'm sure.
Or is there has there been before, is this land acquisition fund new? A new idea that we have kind of a rainy day fund? Is that something we want?
It had the $22,000 in it from 2017 until September of last year when Alger Hall
Right.
was
So
sold.
we've never really had
So
that.
we never really had.
Right.
Can I just add, and Doug can confirm this, the land acquisition reserve fund was created in 2000.
Yes.
It's 25 years old.
When the first bond authority was issued,
Yes,
they created this separate land acquisition reserve fund, but they never
we never.
funded it. There was never any mechanism to fund it. And then the first one was this 20,000 Risbera, I believe, money that came into it. And then, of course, any of the NACA money
Would also.
would go into the acquisition reserve fund.
Let's just put it, I just want to explain the NACA money to the new folks. So there are three, right? Three projects that are eligible for reimbursement if certain NACA grants are, well, two of them are awarded, but they haven't been, the funds have not been dispersed. And one is in the application process from December 24. So it's like 600,000
Do
potentially.
you know off
another-
the top of your head, Scott?
I know one's 300, and I've just done that.
No, it's probably more
Questions, conservation.
Yeah, maybe 600, maybe 700,000.
There's the possibility of $600,000 to $700,000 when the federal government disperses the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, NACA. Hopefully, no, that's NACA. When those funds, they have been awarded, they haven't been dispersed, which is common in the process. Three-year process. And we included, PCLB included in our recommendation that if those are dispersed, they will go back to the town. This is not new information. It was part of the application process and it was part of the
Just
recommendation
like the
process.
Grant Road.
Yes,
Okay.
just like the grant road application. So, for example, we could have $1 million in the land acquisition fund. And so I think that this group is highly interested in the process for that and our role in that fund because it's never been used before in its 25-year history. There was never any money.
Can I just add to, I just want to make
I didn't mean to
sure.
interrupt, I'm sorry.
No, thank you for allowing me to talk during the meeting. I just want to make sure, because I don't want any surprises from board members, that the agreement that we have, this is a Scarborough Land Trust application that we put into
Yes,
NACA.
sorry. I didn't mean that those are guaranteed.
And we said any net
Yes.
funds reimburse go back into the land acquisition reserve fund. There are costs we have to do to get that money from NACA. We have to do what's called the federal yellow book appraisal. So that money will come out of the award. There's some other due diligence costs, additional attorney fees and things like that. So there, it won't be a perfect matchup from what came out of the land bond versus what would be reimbursed, because there are costs that we have to actually pay out for the NACA process.
Yes, that's important clarification.
I do think that there was some money in it that before at one point some money got put in more than just the 20,000. But it's never had an appreciable amount. So how it gets used is a question,
Yes,
which we can't resolve.
it's not a question for us. And I'm not even sure it's a question for Norm. We'll start there. Yes, okay. So now we're gonna move on to the integration of the open space plan with the evaluation tool. And I sent a spreadsheet in advance of this meeting with Doug's initial, I'm calling it mapping, but that's gonna muddy the waters.
Well, no, that's not a bad way, that's not a bad way to think about it, because, you know, all I did was to, I don't know if you can pull this out.
Yes, so that is in the Google Drive. Oh, perfect timing.
Yes.
Could you raise your hand if you do not have access to the Google Drive? Who does not have access to the
I
Google
know
Drive?
you, Jen, and I gotta check on yours.
I'm not sure.
Okay. I put a question mark next.
I'm not sure either. I can get to it if I click on a link from your email, but not if I try to go direct.
We want you to be able to go direct.
Yeah,
We're
I usually-
getting IT on it, is why I'm asking.
Okay.
I usually just get things off your emails. I don't go check.
Okay. Because we're having challenges and that is not an us problem, that's a.
These are the emails that I have connected to it.
That's,
And some are town employees that are connected to it.
so, in a service is Sue.
Yeah.
I am,
Notes for Laura.
I'm the one that's pitching,
Oh.
which is the strength.
And I did make a note, I need to
Okay,
take
I am
Rachel
on
off.
that.
Is that an appropriate email for you?
Yes, yeah.
And then Rachel's no longer,
Yeah, I did write that down, yeah.
she
So I'm
turns
just
off,
gonna add you, Maggie.
because we want to make this easier for people.
Yeah, sure.
Um, So,
What am I pulling up?
you are
Sorry.
going to, yes, so it's going to the open space folder, your open space plan folder, and then there's an Excel spreadsheet, and it is called land assessment form plus OSP categories. Right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
It was an attachment to an email.
Tried
that was on-
to make the name explanatory enough so I'd be able to remember.
So it's taking, it's taking the evaluation tool as it currently exists and mapping it to the organization in the open space plan.
So we start with the open space focus areas. And there are a number of them, but in the report, they link some of them, like the sea level rise and marsh migration. I took the approach of fewer rather than more, break it out, you know, or although sea level rise and marsh migration are directly linked. Recreation connectivity, they link. And that's something we can talk about because they're very different from the standpoint of the trails versus the recreation. But so from the standpoint of our doing an evaluation, maybe we want to separate, I don't know, something to talk about. But anyway, there were 6 categories. And then I mapped those to, and mapping's the perfect word. All I did was go through and map each question. So as you go down, you can see, if you look at the first, if you go down a little bit,
So row 33.
apologize, these spreadsheets are not easy to do this way. It's just, can you go down until you get to the questions?
There.
All right, so here's the first one you see in the yellow H, and I mapped habitat to this particular question. I mapped this to habitat because we're putting the questions into the categories. So what I didn't do was then take this and develop a report that shows habitat. I didn't do that. And the only reason is you may disagree with what my choices were, and this committee may want to move things around, and that's fine. I already had Dick tell me that my codes aren't good, so and I told him we can make those codes anything you want, but that's how I did it. So that was the plan. So there's a pretty glaring shortage of things related to sea level rise and marsh migration in our questions. Because we never really were focused on that. We were focused on watersheds and marsh protection, which might be called the same thing. But we never really built this, we weren't, sea level rise and all that stuff really wasn't on the table.
So my thought is we start the mapping at the conceptual level, like Doug's done. So not getting into the points, and then, as he mentioned, meaning like which kind of, just very broadly mapping, and then we could then go into gaps. And then I think at the end, we do what I want to call the slicing and dicing, how these interact and how we evaluate kind of in their points. Because I think if we start with points, we could have entire meetings where we argue about a single category, where we vigorously discuss a category. And I think we start at a very basic level of the mapping of the categories with the open space plan and the evaluation tool. And then what is in the open space plan that isn't in the evaluation tool, and what is in the evaluation tool that is not in the open space plan. And then we talk about how those interact. Are we on board with that approach?
Are we going to do a workshop for this? It's a meeting, just get together and really just focus on this, because
That's what we're supposed to do today. That's this meeting.
Well, we had one last month and we're supposed to be doing that today, but I do think there are two ways we can do it. We could have a subcommittee and then a workshop. Because my concern is I anticipate that we might, for example, have an application for our either a June meeting or our next meeting. And so that then takes a meeting. So I want to make sure we do this in a timely manner. It's something we've been struggling with for years, but it's something that, so I'm not opposed to a workshop. I'm just like, how do we actually?
I think a subcommittee might be helpful in that it's always easier to have something to react to than to have just a blank slate and we're all pouring over bit by bit. Right.
Well, that's what we have here. I assume that's what they did here. I mean,
So luckily Doug and Maggie were both on the open space, and Andrew were on the open space planning committee, so I am relying a bit on their expertise with the development of the open space plan and how it fits here. But that's just in the sort of beginning stages. What was the intention of the open space plan? How do you feel that it fits? That doesn't mean that we necessarily go with whatever the open space plan did as a.
well, they don't directly compare. I mean, as you go through the open space plan, and those of you, really taking the time to do that will know what I mean, is that the purpose of the open space plan wasn't to set out criteria for evaluating habitat or marsh migration. It was to identify what is important to the people of Scarborough for open space. And habitat was a critical one, for example. And so then the issue becomes, what pieces of property in Scarborough are important to habitat? And they developed that criteria and drew that map. So we now have a map from the open space plan that identifies the most quote unquote valuable from the standpoint of the analysis, there would be standpoint of the public work that was done, et cetera, for habitat. And we can overlay it. What they don't do is say, okay, here's how you evaluate habitat or evaluate marsh migration. But so we do have really good updated maps as to what pieces of property fall into those areas. So as we do evaluation, the questions I have are myriad right now, honestly. I've been, as you know, I've been doing this a long time and I'm all done at the end of this year. So we have new people here getting into this, and we need to map to the open space plan. And And I think a subcommittee to work on this is a great idea, because there's just a lot of moving parts, you know, I mean, questions that I have are not about the open space plan, because the open space plan, I think, is very straightforward. It's a really good piece of work, and we can map to that very clearly. But if we're going to do that, do we want this evaluation? Do we want a different type of evaluation? How many, there's 6 categories. How many habitat questions is right versus how many marsh migration questions?
And then the whole climate change sea level thing.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Marsh migration, that's where that
Right.
comes into. Sea level marsh migration, same thing for that in the open space plan. I mean, so one thing we can do with the open space plan is to use the maps. But the other thing we can do is say, are those, you know, should all those be equal weighted in terms of the number of evaluation points? Does that matter? I might argue that they don't. Some of you might argue that they absolutely do. I can tell you from the open space plan that they are not equal, because they're strictly stuff that came out of public meetings where people put pieces of paper and slides, you know, I mean, it's relatively valuable. It's not quantitatively solid. So, and that's not even the point. The point is what mattered to the people of Scarborough. So what matters to us? I mean, when we do an evaluation, when we built this thing, as you look at it and you look at all the H's, you can tell that habitat was a huge piece. And that was also the largest focus of the Nature Conservancy and the Maine Coast Heritage Trust and the 4 other ones whose evaluation tools we borrowed from because we didn't make it up. We rewrote questions and stuff, but we were grabbing things from other places. So how many habitat questions? How many connectivity questions? And then we get into the next issue, and I apologize for making this sound complicated, but you know, it's worth talking about. So one issue is how many questions do we have in each category? Then the next question is, how are we weighting responses so that we aren't just saying yes or no, because yes or no doesn't help us with the issue of a large piece versus a small piece that has a whole bunch of short. You know, and then the third piece, and I apologize, Joe, so I'll get off this, but the third piece is, can we take what we do and go back and apply it to some of the properties we've already done, so that we actually do have benchmarks? So we can look at it and say, this sort of point range is really where we want to be somehow. And you can't really do that if you just have check marks. But we can, you know, this committee can choose to go that way. We had some evaluations from other towns where they were doing, Falmouth was doing check marks, but they only had 15 questions also for the evaluation. But they didn't have bonding either, you know, so they were using general funds, smaller amounts. So that was a long time ago.
I liked how you said it with the weighting. I think that's going to be our greatest level of discussion, is the weighting. So I think weighting and points to me are interconnected. The council is used to seeing points. The existing toolkit has points, and it's how do we bridge it? And I think the way we do that is I think we are going to have to run some previous properties, and I think that we will likely get some surprises when we test some previous parcels projects, and then see what that looks like. I think that I don't think it's going to be we go through this process once and we're done. I think it's going to be evolving. And as I mentioned, there's also a vulnerabilities assessment that's coming down the road that I would like to see us incorporate. And there's also going to be a trails. It's more than just trails. There's currently in the budget unfunded a trails plan. It's got a longer name. It's not just trails. It's not transportation. Anyway, there's another plan coming that I would like to see incorporated, because I think it's, connectivity and recreational access is really important. So I think this is going to be continuing to evolve over the next couple of years. I would like, my goal would be that we get the open space plan portion completed this calendar year.
Well, the map,
I think that makes sense, although I think we can anticipate some of this stuff coming up, and a lot of the stuff, I think we could make it work, and at least the stuff that we got on the horizon. I feel like this has been served us well for 20 years, and this is like I think we should look at this more as a clean slate. We have this as a model, we have the open space plan as a model. I think we should create a new assessment based on all this information that we can move forward for the next 20 years. And I don't think we should be encumbered by making sure that the past measurements look good in the eyes of this. I think we should go back, once we're all done, we should rescore the old properties so we have a reference number.
Well, I was thinking as an exercise of how, not as a making the past fit the future, but if we were to rescore this today, is it behaving the way we are intending by using real world examples, past examples?
Right, and you can
Not
say,
trying
well,
to
we
make them match.
we had the Libby property that scored 232 points. And a new assessment, that would be a 300 pointer in this start. So I think we just need to give them reference to what it would be in today's math. Because otherwise, if you force the old model on the new model, I think we lose our ability to be really effective in the long term. But rescoring the old stuff in the new system gives us a relatively way to look at the future.
you have, I don't disagree at all. I mean, the properties we purchased have to be rescored using any new system. And then you have benchmarks. And then we can look at that going forward. I think the benchmarks are valuable. I'm advocating for benchmarks. I'm not advocating for all of these questions. I think simplifying these is definitely possible now. We were much more complex back then for two reasons. One, we were using work by the Nature Conservancy and Maine Coast Heritage Trust and others that was very detailed. Oh, and Land for Maine's Future, which was brand new. So we had some really detailed stuff. And that's the kind of thing that is done for those. And then the other, and the other piece of that was, who was our audience? Our audience for the council at the time in the town. This was new, and they wanted scoring. They wanted detail. They wanted, it was necessary, and it worked. It's great. So then the question is, and this question's been raised before, is how do we redo this? That's the issue. How do we do it? I personally don't have any objection to it at all. I just want us, as I lead this committee, I want us to have a high quality evaluation tool that provides a weighted approach to evaluating the properties and provides a score that allows us to score our older properties with all benchmarks. Because, without benchmarks, it becomes purely an exercise in trying to sell stuff to people. And I don't think should be the whole story. I think the stuff that Scott develops for us on these for the land trust and others does a lot of selling. There's no question it should, right? But our original process was the people who are trying to buy this land sell us on the idea using the criteria that we set out, and then we evaluate it and we have benchmarks. Question is, how do you redo this? Because it can be, obviously it can be done, but how are we, a small group, we brought that up.
I think it has to be a small group because it's just so technical that it would be difficult in a large group setting to go through.
This conversation proves that.
This conversation proves that.
Well, I mean, we do have the ones that we have here. So, I think a small group can get together. I would ask that group make sure that the people here who are adept at habitat knowledge and the importance of how spaces interconnect with wildlife, I'd just like to make sure we have that expertise. subcommittee, whoever's doing it, because that's critical. Other
You need to be there too, so you're not getting out of this.
So there,
I can't even imagine.
You have to.
I think there are.
I'm happy to help. I am not interested in, in trying to dictate anything, because I'm not married to this, even though I was married to it. I'm not divorced either. But I don't think in the current environment, and I've been thinking this for a while, that it's not necessary to have this complex point system. So then I've been thinking about how else to do the point systems, and I haven't come up with one yet, so I'm really interested in getting together with some people.
So simplify.
Well, I mean, it's a nice idea, right?
Right.
Let's do check and check plus. How many points do you give for check and check plus on connectivity versus a piece of beachfront?
Yeah, the weighting.
I mean, how many points do you give? I mean, part of the reason that this is so complex is points. And then size, should there be more points if you have more buffer? Should there be less? Honestly, I don't think that's necessary anymore. I think we could do check plus, that sort of thing for buffers, things like that. So I think we can move to a much more simplified approach if we get the right group together and just get on.
Yeah, I'm in favor of point system, but it's more simplified point system. I think check plus, it's hard to understand. You end up with a graph that has columns and rows.
I think it's too radical a
Right,
change.
so I think simplify.
I just threw that out.
Simplify.
I'd already ruled that out in my own head.
Okay, simplify makes a lot of sense, but I think we still need to be a more simple point system.
So big picture to me, we are fortunate today to have more mapping available. So how do we, yes,
Really apologize, folks.
Right, thanks.
It's a situation.
This is, you will be nominated.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a good idea. So.
how do we best leverage the maps? And I don't have an answer for that, because this is a mapping translation, a simplified mapping translation. So how about we decide who wants to be on the subcommittee? And then related to that, similar to open space plan, are there other, and I know this gets complicated, and I don't know how this relates, but the land trust is here and they have a lot of expertise. How do we include outside, non-committee member experts? That's the process. And I know that's a whole another bit.
Is a subcommittee meeting an official meeting?
So
Is it like a workshop?
It's like, my understanding
So
is like.
therefore, can
workshop.
someone who's not on this committee be a member of the subcommittee or participate in a meeting of the subcommittee?
Sorry.
I can dig into it. I don't.
Yeah, you can just dig into that, because I do think that would be helpful.
Because it would be helpful if either Andy or Scott would help out on that initiative as well.
Especially for the
They put
weighting.
their boots on, they go on, they walk these properties, they know what they're looking for. So your input is going to be very helpful.
We've also talked about additional categories authorized under the bond, like historical preservation. So could we ask the Historical Society to weigh in on that part? Not that it matches.
We probably should have some input from them. I'm not sure if we want to, the focus of the subcommittee.
No, not the focus of the subcommittee, but in parallel. And
Yeah,
So-
I would call it
working group, we can call it whatever.
Because I think you be careful, because I think in order for this to happen, a small group of people need together to come up with a proposal,
Yes.
strong proposal that can be presented to the committee. Because I'm not saying workshops are public, meetings are public. Do a workshop. it has to be
Workshop is public.
Right, so we wouldn't be in a workshop, we'd be in
Makes sense.
that mode we're trying to get to a point where it's ready to be.
So if you could get us some clarification on how we set up a working group. Which is not a subcommittee. Because I don't see how we accomplish it in the
Well, that's,
meeting space we have.
So in the municipal world, you have to ask for permission just to set up a.
No, we need to
Couple people to get
understand
together?
the guidelines.
right. It's not permission, it's what's
It's
the
not.
process?
It's process.
And, yeah,
Who can be a member of the working group?
Oh, okay. Committee versus non-committee.
Yes. That's all. And then,
time, and space to cash this thing out.
for example, you don't need to publish an agenda a week in advance and have the
Yeah.
owl and this is,
It's just, or meet at somebody's porch and just hammer it out.
Right.
yes,
Yeah,
which is what needs to happen.
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
I would like to have some guidance about responsibilities are, what our duties are about making it public and those sorts of
Yes.
things. So if you could just check on that, that would be really helpful.
Okay, so I think we can't make a decision. Well, we can't make a decision today on who is part of the working group because we don't know structure. So I would say that we make that decision at our next meeting.
I think that's too long. Can we do that via email?
I don't know if we can do it.
Can we
Can
do
we
it?
via email?
Yeah, let me get clarity first.
Okay.
People who are
And then
interested,
I'll circle back
Get
to
this
the
done.
larger group, to the whole group.
Great,
or people who are interested could contact you.
yes. If you're
Yeah,
interested, let me know.
I'm willing to help out.
So we got Sam and Doug so far.
Right, as long as Doug's involved.
I think we've also thrown Noah in there,
Yeah.
I think Noah would be good.
Yeah,
so.
that guy.
I know where my skills are and this isn't one of them.
You might ask Sue if she wants to do it.
And
She
Sue,
has some
Yeah, Sue would
institutional
have some.
knowledge. I don't know if she has time to do it.
she's going into her busy season is the challenge.
Yeah.
Anyway, anyone else? And then depending on the rules, we would then invite non-members.
We're happy to help. I think we bring a lot of expertise, just even outside of our projects. In terms of, we've been looking a lot at, well, what does it mean for scoring, for example, you have a scoring point where it's endangered and threatened species. And of course, I've been talking to this board about we need to broaden that definition for any project that comes forward, that it's really more about what are the vulnerable species in Scarborough. We don't care about, at least I don't think this board cares necessarily about, endangered species that might be found in Caribou area of Maine or Presque Isle or something. We're focused on just the lands within the town. So, how do we take that state information, all that beginning with habitat information, which was done at a statewide focus and with kind of a scaling of state priorities down to a local level.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of the process. Is any of the information that relies on a statewide list or a map, is it up to date? Created the list. Is there more input that it's just on this list? Because I think we need to be more flexible about getting information that we know is available, even though it's not the official. Like some of this map is, 2011, 2017.
Well, those are
It's old information. Is there, maybe there's not better information, but maybe there is. And again, it's towards the Scarborough.
So,
We have our endangered critters list for Scarborough there.
so that's the working group. We currently have our next meeting scheduled for July. Is there going to be a request for a June meeting?
We should have-
Just for this evaluation tool. What happens, it appears, is that we get in discussions and then there's this much space left for the, but, so I'm wondering if we have something in June that's just focused on that. Questionnaire, I mean, evaluation.
So we can either try to set a date today, or we can do this via email, because we are missing. 3
Probably best
emails.
via email.
So we'll do, June's probably gonna be complicated for folks. So we'll do, I'll just say doodle, but we won't do a doodle. We'll do an email for a June date. And is it a workshop? Just, again, a workshop focused on the evaluation tool.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll do a June workshop.
It's a public meeting workshop. Hopefully some things to react to from this.
So maybe middle to end of June.
Yep.
So to give time
Oh, yeah,
for
definitely.
people.
Give us some votes.
Middle to end of June, and that will be, really, it's the working group will present out.
Yeah.
Yep. There are no additional items. Like, for example, we're not gonna look at the land acquisition reserve fund report, we're only gonna get a report out and discussion of the evaluation tool. Mid to late June, and that will be determined via email and we'll. I think that gets us
Okay.
today. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to
adjourn?
adjourn.
Second, all in favor,
Yeah, you're right.
and we are done.